Hello, SPED 2010 students. I hope everyone having a great week. I also hope that you're enjoying this beautiful weather that we are having. So we are almost through with the end of the semester. So just looking at our course calendar here, we have a couple weeks. So spring classes end April 26th. Finals week is April 29th through May 2nd. I have sent an email to the class regarding our final exam schedule. Our final exam opens on Monday, April 29th. It will close Tuesday, April 30th, I think at 11:30 maybe. So that gives you a couple days to take the final. The final is not comprehensive. It is not over everything. It's only going to be over module 4, and you will have a study guide provided for you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Next week, we are also going to be finishing out with our explicit instructions. So this week we're doing week 13, and next week we will do the last week, which is week 14. So I just also wanted to talk about a couple of things as well concerning service learning. I have graded the service learning journals. I'm in the middle right now of grading your written analysis, which is your reflection paper. These types of projects takes a while to grade because there's a lot of moving parts. So I have to look at your logged hours, your match up that with your journal. We have to look at your evaluation from your mentor teacher. Then we also have to grade the journal and then the written analysis. So there's two components that are major, but there's also the major component from your evaluation. So, really, three main components. So, taking a look at all of that and going through the rubric, it takes time. But I am finished with half of it. I am almost finished with working on grading your reflection papers, which is your written analysis. So, I will email you once those are graded. I also will email you once I'm through grading the co teaching assignment projects. So just make sure that you email me or reach out if there's a grade you don't understand, like there's a zero. I'm sometimes in the middle of grading it. If you know you've done something and it's a zero, most likely I haven't graded it yet. Also, if you have any work that is incomplete that you know you haven't completed, please reach out to me. The makeup window is now. It will only go through this week because next week we are going to be finishing out and then getting ready for our last exam and doing our end of the course wrap up materials. So, one thing I also wanted to note as well as when we go to course information and hit content, I just wanted to make you aware of this. If you go down under module 4, you're going to see something that says post test and course feedback. I went ahead and opened the course feedback for you. It doesn't close till May 2nd, but just keep in mind you have 2 weeks, this semester is over completely. So finals week is April 29th and through May 2nd, and everything is kind of stressed right now. You're trying to get everything in. We're wrapping up the semester. You have finals week, so it's a lot going on. So I thought I would go ahead and open these things for you so you can try to get those finished when you have time and you won't have to worry about that and you can get it off your plate. So the first thing I want to talk about is the course feedback. Now the course feedback, it doesn't count against you if you don't do it. The course feedback is really helpful to me, right? So when you provide feedback, it allows me to improve upon the course. So I want you to describe what you felt were positive aspects of the course, maybe something negative. Be sure to not just identify a problem, but also think of a solution of how the course could be better. Because if you're honest with your feedback, it's very valuable to me, and it also helps me improve the course in the future. So please, I ask you to do the course feedback. Also, something that you have to do is your post test. So, if you remember, when you first came at the beginning of the semester and the semester started, I had you take a pre-test and you didn't study for it. The pre-test was for me to gauge where you were in your knowledge about special education. This post test is the same exact test. And what that allows me to see is the growth, right? So it allows me to see how much you've grown over the semester and that you're able to meet the course learning objectives or outcomes. So the post test is also something that I want you to do. It doesn't take a lot of time. It is open for you. It is the same test that you took at the beginning of the semester. You'll see it also closes May 2nd. So it's open now as well as the course feedback. So you are actually going to see them again next week because I put them in the assignments section. But I just wanted you to be aware that you are able to get to them now if you just scroll down underneath Module 4. So it'll be under week 14. You will see them there and you can work on that if you need to, or if you want to get started on that. So, like I said, this week we are working on differentiated instruction. Now, you've kind of been doing a little bit differentiated instruction. So, if you were working on your co teaching strategies, right, and best practices, differentiated instruction is one of those best practices. So, what we're really looking at is how do you differentiate instruction to maximize the learning of all needs? So, think about inclusive classrooms specifically. So this week, our objective is to discuss the relative advantage of instructional tools and strategies based on student characteristics and disabilities. So we're looking at the students' needs and how to differentiate instruction. What are the advantages of this? What kind of instructional tools and strategies are going to help me be able to differentiate for those students? Now remember, when we're looking at recommended educational strategies, we're looking at those who have exceptionalities in the inclusive classroom because that's our focus in this course. And remember, all of that falls under those categories under IDEA and the Tennessee State Department of Education. So these disabilities and those categories are what we're specifically looking at those students' needs. So you do have some learning tasks. You're going to be reading in the textbook. I have an article here that I feel like is going to help you connect deeper to the understanding of what differentiated instruction is and why should we do it in inclusive classrooms. And then your IRIS module is also about differentiated instruction and how can we maximize learning of all students. So, when we're talking about assessment, that IRIS module is going to be your assessment piece because once you go through it, you will be completing a worksheet. And we'll go through that in just a minute. And that worksheet is what you're submitting for points this week. Now, when we're looking at specifically keywords and concepts, we really need to look at these concepts and keywords. Obviously, we're going to be looking at differentiated instruction because that's what our whole goal and focus is this week. But underneath differentiated instruction, we're really looking at flexible grouping. What is formative assessment and summative assessment? We're looking at readiness, the student's interest, the student's learning profile. We're looking at the content itself. We're looking at the process and the product. We're looking at the learning environment and how it's set up to support students. We're looking at if we're using any manipulatives, graphic organizers. Now, if you remember correctly, graphic organizers was one of the strategies that you could use when you were doing one of the co teaching models. um, Learning centers, rubrics. How do we use those when we're assessing students? Self assessment, letting the students assess themselves, and then also portfolios. And also, that self assessment really can come back to the teacher and educator in the classroom as well, because you're looking at what you're doing, if it's effective and if it's not effective. What are our challenges, and how do we kind of pivot and kind of relook at what we're doing to make it better. Then we have portfolios, which is also another assessment that we could give students. So we really look at all of these concepts because they all are encompassing under differentiated instruction, which is our focus, because this can really help students accommodate them, meet their goals on their IEPs, and even if the student doesn't have an IEP and they have a 504, these are some of those modifications and accommodations that we can look at to meet the needs of all students in the classroom. So, for learning goals, I gave you a lot of different things I want you to focus on and look. So, obviously, we're going to be looking at our textbook this week. We're going to utilize it because in Chapter 2, Exceptional Learners Textbook is going to help us connect those pieces. So, you will read Chapter 2. In addition to that, you have that reading article that I talked about, which is what is differentiated instruction and why should you do it? Why differentiate? How is this going to help? You'll see the article is really good. It's a little dated back in 2011, but it's still a great article because it's going to help you make that connection and really dive into what is it? What does it look like in the classroom itself? And then for presentations, I have a PowerPoint here on differentiated instruction. I also have a Nearpod quiz, and you'll find that underneath assignments. Now, the Nearpod quiz is really great because it gives you feedback, immediate feedback, and it's going to let you see kind of gauge what you know about differentiated instruction and kind of quiz you a little bit. So, this quiz is really good. I encourage you to take it. For the assignment, I said you will be doing an IRIS module, and inside the IRIS modules, you're familiar with them at this point in the semester. You know they always have this assessment component. I always encourage you to do those, right? Because that's another way to get feedback and seeing what you're learning. But you will not be turning the assessment in. I have a worksheet for you that you will be submitting instead. So when you click on the IRIS module, it will look like that. It has a link to open up to the actual Iris module itself, which is what you will work through. The bottom link here is going to pull up a Word document, which is the worksheet you will be submitting. Okay, so if you'll see here, I've kind of helped you out and put the page numbers in here. That's going to help you navigate through the Iris module to focus on where exactly am I talking about and what do I want to focus on. Because the point of this is really for you to get feedback, but also to learn and connect to the material that you're learning about in the Iris module instead of just going through it and not really taking notes and answering. So for this first section here, you will use page 4 in the IRIS module, and then you will continue with page 5. Now, this section here is really thinking about how does a teacher respond to learners' needs, right? So there's principles that you have to use when you're thinking about differentiating in a classroom, right? So you have the assessment component. You know, you're kind of assessing what they're doing, their work, because they still have to meet those standards, but we're also looking at the tasks that you're giving them themselves. And then we're looking at how are you grouping these students together. Flexible grouping is a really great way for students to be able to work together, but to also differentiate, right? So that's one of the ways you can differentiate. So you're going to look at page 4 and look at using those principles. You're going to look at how they differentiate. Okay, now this is talking specifically on page 4 about teachers. The bottom section, which is the next page, is really talking about the students when we're differentiating and that what that looks like. Now on page 6, there is a video, and you're going to be really listing the 4 ways that teachers can vary different activities, right? So we want students to master the skills. So what are those 4 ways? Moving on to page 7, also talking about the assessment piece. You can't just differentiate and leave it there, right? We have to always be assessing and reflecting on what we're doing. So when we want to assess the students, we're looking at these things. Um, and what are you offering the students? So that way they can show that they've mastered something and demonstrate the understanding and the mastery of the skills. The next one's really talking about when Dr. Tomlinson was talking about, again, the assessment piece, but it's really focusing on standardized tests, right? And how there's a teaching learning process. And students normally have a preferred way of learning. What's their learning style? Everyone does. So we really have to match up differentiated instruction to students' learning profiles and their process of how they learn best. Okay. One thing I did want to mention here is on this worksheet, the part that's universal design for learning, you're not going to be doing that section. You're only going to be focusing on the differentiated instruction section. So just please keep in that in mind. So you only do these 2 pages here. You won't be doing the bottom section. So just omit that. You could even uh, clip it out if you want. I'm only looking for you to do these 2 pages. All right, so that pretty much completes week 13. I will be sending another video out next week, really focusing on um, week 14, but also looking at maybe sending two videos. One will be on about week 14, and then the next one is going to really be about finals week, about your final and where you find your materials for studying, and then also looking at those end of the term closing activities for this course itself. All right, guys, I hope you have a great week. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And until next time, take care.